In the heart of Chicago, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and streets buzzed with life, there lived a woman named Maria. She wasn't someone you'd notice at first glance, just another face in the crowd trying to make ends meet. But if you looked closely, you'd see the weight of her struggles etched into her tired eyes. Life hadn't been easy for her. A single mother of 2 kids, she juggled 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Still, no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed enough. Winter had arrived early that year, wrapping the city in icy winds and frosty mornings. On this particular evening, Maria trudged through the cold after finishing her shift at a small diner downtown. Her feet ached from standing all day and her fingers were numb despite the gloves she wore. The only thing keeping her going was the thought of seeing her children when she got home. They were her light, the reason she pushed through every exhausting day. As she reached the bus stop near the corner of 4th Street, Maria pulled out her wallet to check how much money she had left. Inside was a crumpled $10 bill. That was it. $10 to last her until payday, which was still days away. It wasn't enough for groceries or even the bus fare home, but it was all she had. Sighing deeply, she tucked the wallet back into her coat pocket and leaned against the metal pole of the bus shelter, trying to shield herself from the biting wind. Just then, something caught her eye. Sitting on the bench inside the shelter was an elderly woman. She looked frail, her thin frame wrapped in a worn-out coat that barely kept her warm. Her face was pale, and tears streamed silently down her cheeks. Maria hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach her. But something about the woman's sadness tugged at her heartstrings. "Are you okay?" Maria asked gently as she stepped closer. Her voice was soft, almost drowned out by the hum of passing cars. The woman looked up, startled, as if she hadn't noticed anyone standing there. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then, wiping her tears with trembling hands, she shook her head. "I'm lost," the woman whispered, her voice cracking. "I came here to visit my daughter, but I lost my purse somewhere along the way. Now I don't have any money to get back to her house." She paused, looking down at her lap. "I don't know what to do." Maria felt a lump form in her throat. She knew exactly what it was like to feel helpless, to be trapped in a situation where every option felt impossible. As she listened to the woman's story, memories of her own struggles flooded her mind. There were nights when she'd gone to bed hungry so her kids could eat, times when she'd skipped paying bills just to buy them new shoes for school. And yet, here she was now, listening to a stranger who needed help more than she did. Without thinking twice, Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out the $10 bill. Her fingers tightened around it for a brief moment. This was all she had. If she gave it away, she wouldn't have anything left, not even enough to catch the bus home. But looking at the elderly woman's tear-streaked face, she knew what she had to do. "Here," Maria said, holding out the bill. "Take this. Maybe it'll help." The woman stared at her in disbelief. "No, I can't take your money," she protested weakly. "You need it more than I do." "It's fine," Maria insisted, pressing the bill into the woman's hand. "Really, you'll need it more tonight." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The woman clutched the money tightly, her lips quivering as fresh tears welled up in her eyes. "Thank you," she murmured. "God bless you." Maria managed a small smile before stepping back. She didn't want to linger too long. She knew the bus would arrive soon and she needed to figure out how she'd manage without any cash. As she stood there waiting, a strange mix of emotions washed over her. Part of her regretted giving away her last $10, knowing how tough the next few days would be. But another part of her felt strangely at peace, like she'd done something right, even if it came at a personal cost. When the bus finally pulled up, Maria climbed aboard. The driver, a middle-aged man named Joe who'd seen her many times before, glanced at her sympathetically. "Rough night?" he asked. "You could say that," Maria replied with a faint laugh. To her relief, Joe let her ride for free, as he often did when he knew she was short on cash. Settling into a seat near the window, Maria stared outside, watching the city lights blur past. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that dinner wouldn't be happening anytime soon. But as she gazed out at the snowy streets, a thought crossed her mind. Maybe things weren't as hopeless as they seemed. Sure, she'd given away her last $10, leaving herself with nothing. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that her act of kindness might mean something bigger, something she couldn't yet understand. Little did she know, destiny had already begun weaving its threads, setting the stage for a journey that would change her life forever. The next morning, Maria woke up earlier than usual. Her body was still tired from the long hours she'd worked the day before, but her mind was restless. She couldn't stop thinking about the elderly woman at the bus stop and the $10 bill she'd handed over. It wasn't just the money that weighed on her, it was everything else. How would she get through the next few days without even a penny to spare? What if one of her kids needed something urgent? These questions swirled in her head like a storm she couldn't quiet. Despite her worries, Maria dragged herself out of bed and got ready for work. Her first job of the day was at the diner where she served breakfast to early risers, truck drivers, office workers, and college students rushing to class. The diner wasn't fancy. It had cracked vinyl booths and peeling wallpaper, but it was always busy. For Maria, this place was both a lifeline and a prison. It paid the bills, but it also drained every ounce of energy she had. As she tied her apron around her waist and stepped behind the counter, Maria forced a smile onto her face. Smiling came naturally to her, even when she didn't feel like it. Customers liked her friendly demeanor, and tips were crucial for making ends meet. Today, though, she felt like her smile was thinner than usual, more fragile. Still, she greeted everyone warmly, pouring coffee and taking orders with practiced efficiency. Around mid-morning, a man walked in and took a seat at one of the corner tables. He looked different from the regular crowd, dressed in a sharp suit, his leather shoes polished to a shine. Maria noticed him immediately, not because he stood out physically, but because there was something calm and thoughtful about the way he carried himself. Most people rushed in and out of the diner, barely glancing at anyone. But this man seemed present, as if he actually cared about the world around him. Maria approached his table with her notepad in hand. "Morning," she said cheerfully, though her voice lacked its usual spark. "What can I get you?" "Just coffee, black," he replied, giving her a polite nod. His voice was deep and steady, the kind that made you want to listen. As Maria turned to grab the coffee pot, she heard him ask, "How's your day going?" She paused, surprised by the question. Not many customers bothered to ask how she was doing. They were usually too focused on their meals or phones. Turning back to him, she shrugged lightly. "It's okay, I guess, just another busy day." He nodded again, his eyes studying her for a moment longer than most people would. "You seem like someone who works hard," he observed. There was no judgment in his tone, just genuine curiosity. Maria chuckled softly. "Yeah, you could say that. 2 jobs, 2 kids, it keeps me busy." "That's admirable," he said simply. Then after a beat, he added, "Do you ever do anything nice for yourself? Take a break once in a while." Maria blinked, caught off guard by the question. No one had asked her that in years. Between juggling work, parenting, and surviving paycheck to paycheck, taking care of herself wasn't exactly a priority. "Not really," she admitted. "There's not much time for breaks." The man smiled faintly, as if he understood completely. They fell silent as Maria poured his coffee and placed it on the table. Before walking away, she glanced at him again. Something about him felt familiar, though she was sure they'd never met before. Maybe it was the kindness in his expression, or maybe it was the way he spoke, as if he truly saw her, not just as a waitress, but as a person. Over the next hour, Maria kept an eye on him from across the room. He sipped his coffee slowly, occasionally, jotting notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Every now and then he'd glance outside, lost in thought. When he finally signaled for the check, Maria brought it over quickly, expecting him to leave without another word. Instead, he surprised her. "You know," he began casually, "I've been traveling a lot lately, meeting all kinds of people. Sometimes I hear stories that stick with me, Stories about kindness, sacrifice, courage, you name it. He paused, looking directly at her. Have you ever done something selfless, even when you didn't have much to give? Maria froze, unsure how to respond. Was he fishing for information, or was this just small talk? After a moment, she decided to answer honestly. Actually, yeah. Just yesterday, I gave my last $10 to a stranger at the bus stop. She needed it more than I did. His eyebrows rose slightly, intrigued. That's quite a gesture, especially since $10 isn't nothing these days. It wasn't easy, Maria admitted, her voice softening. But I figured if I were in her shoes, I'd hope someone would help me too. The man nodded thoughtfully, his gaze lingering on her face. That's a rare quality, he said quietly. Not everyone would do what you did. Maria shrugged, feeling a little uncomfortable under his scrutiny. I don't think it's a big deal. Anyone would have done the same. I'm not so sure about that, he replied with a faint smile. Then, reaching into his wallet, he pulled out a $20 bill and placed it on the table along with the tip. Thank you for the coffee, and for reminding me why humanity isn't completely lost. Before Maria could protest, he stood up and headed toward the door. She watched him go, her heart pounding. That tip alone was more than she usually earned, in an entire shift. And yet, it wasn't just the money that left her stunned. It was the conversation. Something about the way he'd spoken, the way he'd looked at her, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. Later that afternoon, as Maria cleaned tables and refilled cups, her thoughts kept drifting back to the man in the suit. Who was he? Why had he come into her life, even if only for a short while? She didn't have answers, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting wasn't random. Maybe it was wishful thinking, or maybe it was instinct. Either way, she found herself hoping he'd return. And sure enough, he did. 2 days later, the same man walked into the diner again. This time, he didn't sit in the corner. He chose a stool at the counter, right where Maria could see him clearly. When she approached him, he greeted her with a warm smile. Good to see you again, he said. Mind if we talk some more? Maria hesitated for a second, unsure what to expect. But there was something trustworthy about him, something that put her at ease. Sure, she replied, leaning against the counter. What's on your mind? Well, he started, folding his hands neatly in front of him. I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, about kindness, sacrifice, all those things you mentioned. And I realized something. People like you are the backbone of this world. You might not realize it, but what you do matters. A lot. Maria laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't know about all that. I'm just trying to get by, same as everyone else. You're selling yourself short, he countered gently. From what you told me, you gave away your last $10 to help a stranger. That's not just getting by. That's extraordinary. Maria shifted uncomfortably, unused to receiving compliments. It wasn't a big deal, she mumbled. Anyone would have done the same. I disagree, he said firmly. Not everyone has the courage to put others first, especially when they're struggling themselves. That takes strength. Real strength. For a moment, Maria didn't know what to say. No one had ever called her strong before. To her, she was just a mom doing whatever it took to survive. But hearing him say those words stirred something inside her. A flicker of pride, perhaps, or maybe just hope. So, he continued, breaking the silence. Tell me more about you. What's your story? And so, Maria began to open up. She told him about her kids, her jobs, the endless cycle of working and worrying. She talked about the sacrifices she'd made, the dreams she'd put on hold, and the fear that sometimes kept her awake at night. He listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. By the time she finished, she felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her burdens had eased them, even just a little. When she was done, the man leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. You've been through a lot, he said finally. But you're still standing. That says a lot about who you are. Maria smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to being praised, especially by strangers. But there was something sincere about him, something that made her believe he meant every word. Before leaving, he promised to return soon. "We'll talk again," he said, placing another generous tip on the counter. "There's more to discuss." As Maria watched him walk away, she couldn't help but wonder, what did he mean by more? Whatever it was, she knew one thing. For certain, her life had taken an unexpected turn and she was curious to see where it might lead. Over the next few days, Maria found herself looking forward to her shifts at the diner more than usual. It wasn't just because of the tips, though they were certainly welcome, but because she couldn't stop thinking about the man in the suit. His words had stayed with her, lingering in her mind like a melody she couldn't shake. He'd made her feel seen, valued, and maybe even a little hopeful. For someone who spent most of her life feeling invisible, that was no small thing. When he finally returned, it was on a rainy afternoon. The diner was quieter than usual, with only a handful of customers scattered around. Maria spotted him as soon as he walked in, his umbrella dripping water onto the tiled floor. She greeted him with a smile, trying to play it cool, but inside her heart was racing. There was something about him that felt different from anyone else she'd ever met. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, calm, confident, yet approachable, or maybe it was the fact that he seemed genuinely interested in her life. Whatever it was, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. "Back again?" she teased lightly as she handed him a menu. "You must really love our coffee." He chuckled, shaking droplets of rain off his coat. "Something like that," he replied. "But honestly, I've been meaning to talk to you more." "You're an interesting person, Maria." Maria raised an eyebrow, half amused and half skeptical. "Interesting? Me? I'm just a waitress working 2 jobs to keep my head above water. Trust me, there's nothing exciting about that." "Oh, I disagree," he said, leaning forward slightly. "People like you are rare these days. You work hard, care deeply, and still find ways to help others, even when you have almost nothing left to give. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary." Maria shifted uncomfortably, unused to hearing such praise. Most people didn't think twice about what she did or how she lived. To them, she was just another face in the crowd, another cog in the machine. But this man, he saw something in her that she hadn't seen in herself in years. It was unsettling, but also strangely comforting. "So," he continued, changing the subject slightly, "how are things going for you? Any better since we last talked?" Maria hesitated, unsure how much to share. Part of her wanted to open up completely, to pour out all her fears and frustrations. But another part, the part that had learned to guard herself against disappointment, held back. "Things are okay," she said finally. "Still tough, but manageable. My kids are doing well, so that's what matters." He nodded thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's good to hear. Your kids must mean everything to you." "They do," Maria admitted, her voice softening. "They're my reason for waking up every morning. Even on the hardest days, knowing I'm doing this for them makes it worth it." "That's beautiful," he said sincerely. Then, after a pause, he added, "But tell me something. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Not for your kids, not for work, but for you?" Maria blinked, caught off guard by the question. No one had asked her that in years, not even herself. "I don't know," she admitted slowly. "Probably before I became a mom. Back then I used to dream about traveling, starting my own business, things like that, but now—" She trailed off, shrugging helplessly. "Now there's no time for dreams." The man leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. "It's funny," he mused. "We spend so much of our lives giving, to our families, our jobs, our communities, and yet we often forget to give to ourselves. But here's the thing. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. In fact, it's necessary. If you don't refill your own cup, how can you keep pouring into others?" Maria frowned, considering his words. On one hand, they made perfect sense. On the other, they felt impossibly out of reach. How could she focus on herself when there were bills to pay, mouths to feed, and endless responsibilities waiting for her. Still, there was something undeniably appealing about the idea, a tiny spark of possibility flickering in the back of her mind. Before she could respond, the man changed the subject again. "Tell me, Maria," he began, lowering his voice slightly, "have you ever thought about doing something different with your life? Something that challenges you, excites you, maybe even scares you a little?" Maria laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "Different? Like what? I barely have time to think about tomorrow, let alone some big dream." "I understand," he said gently. "But sometimes, opportunities come when we least expect them. And when they do, it's important to be open to them. Life has a way of surprising us if we let it." Maria tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. "Are you saying something's coming my way?" she asked, half joking. He smiled, enigmatically. "Let's just say I have a feeling things are about to change for you, whether you're ready or not." His words sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of excitement and apprehension. What did he mean by change? Was he hinting at something specific, or was he just being philosophical? Either way, she couldn't deny the curiosity bubbling inside her. For the rest of his visit, they talked about everything and nothing. Her childhood, his travels, random stories that popped into their heads. It was easy, natural, like talking to an old friend rather than a near stranger. By the time he left, Maria realized she hadn't thought about her worries once during their conversation. For the first time in ages, she felt a sense of lightness, as if a weight she hadn't noticed until now had been lifted. Later that evening, as Maria tucked her kids into bed, her mind kept circling back to the man in the suit. Who was he, really? Why had he taken such an interest in her life? And what did he mean by opportunities and change? She didn't have answers, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was on the horizon. The next morning, as she prepared for another long day of work, Maria decided to take his advice to heart, at least a little bit. Instead of rushing through her routine like always, she took a few extra minutes to enjoy her coffee, savoring the warmth as it spread through her chest. It was a small act, but it made her feel grounded, centered in a way she hadn't felt in years. As she headed out the door, she reminded herself of what he'd said. Life has a way of surprising us if we let it. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out, and deep gear, down. She couldn't wait to see what happened next. The days turned into weeks, and Maria's life began to shift in subtle ways. The man in the suit, whose name she still didn't know, continued visiting the diner regularly. Each time he came, their conversations grew deeper, more personal. He asked questions that made her think about things she hadn't considered in years, her childhood dreams, her passions, the kind of person she wanted to be. Sometimes his words left her feeling inspired. Other times they unsettled her, forcing her to confront fears she'd buried long ago. One chilly morning, as Maria wiped down tables before the lunch rush, the man walked in earlier than usual. Instead of taking his usual seat at the counter, he motioned for her to join him at a quiet booth near the window. His demeanor was different today, more serious, yet somehow warmer. Maria hesitated for a moment, glancing around to make sure no one needed her attention, then slid into the seat across from him. "You've been on my mind," he began without preamble, his voice low but steady. "I've been thinking about our conversations, about your story, and I have to ask, what would you do if you weren't afraid?" Maria blinked, caught off guard by the question. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I mean," he clarified, leaning forward slightly, "if fear wasn't holding you back, if you didn't worry about money or failure or what others might think, what would you want for your life? What would truly excite you?" Maria stared at him, her mind racing. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to dream that the idea felt foreign, almost reckless. "I don't know," she admitted after a pause. "Maybe I'd go back to school or start my own business. Something meaningful. Something that could help people." He nodded thoughtfully, as if he'd expected this answer. That's a good start, he said. But here's the thing. Dreams like that don't have to stay dreams. With the right opportunity and the right mindset, they can become reality. Maria laughed softly, though it lacked humor. Opportunities aren't exactly lining up for me, she pointed out. Most days I'm just trying to survive. I understand, he replied gently. But sometimes opportunities come in unexpected ways. You just have to be open to them. He paused, studying her face intently. Tell me, Maria, how much do you trust yourself? How much faith do you have in your ability to rise above your circumstances? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The truth was, she didn't trust herself. Not completely. Life had knocked her down too many times, forcing her to play it safe, to settle for less. But deep down, buried beneath layers of doubt and exhaustion, there was still a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she was capable of more. I guess I don't know, she admitted finally. I've always done what I had to do, but I've never really taken risks. Not big ones anyway. That's understandable, he said with a faint smile. Risk is scary. It makes us vulnerable. But it's also where growth happens. Think about it. Every major decision you've ever made, every challenge you've overcome, required some level of risk. Even giving away your last $10 to that stranger at the bus stop, that was a risk, wasn't it? Maria nodded slowly, seeing his point. She hadn't thought about it that way before, but he was right. Helping the elderly woman had been a leap of faith, an act of courage disguised as kindness. And while it had left her temporarily worse off, it had also given her a sense of peace she couldn't explain. Exactly, he continued, sensing her realization. You're stronger than you realize, Maria. Braver, too. And I think it's time you started believing that. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Maria felt a lump rise in her throat, unsure whether to laugh or cry. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such conviction, such belief in her potential. It was overwhelming, but also strangely empowering. So, he said, breaking the silence, here's the real reason I wanted to talk to you today. I run a company, a business that helps people build better lives for themselves. We operate offices all over the country, including one here in Chicago. And recently, I've been looking for someone to lead the local branch. Maria's eyes widened in shock. Wait, are you offering me a job? She blurted out, her voice tinged with disbelief. Not just any job, he corrected, his tone firm but kind. A leadership role, someone who can manage the team, handle day-to-day operations, and connect with the community. It's a big responsibility, yes, but I believe you're the right person for it. Maria shook her head instinctively. No, you must be mistaken, she stammered. I'm not qualified for something like that. I don't have a fancy degree or corporate experience, I'm just me. And that's exactly why I think you'd excel, he countered calmly. This isn't about qualifications on paper, it's about character, integrity, and the ability to inspire others. Those are qualities you already possess, Maria. I've seen it firsthand. She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Could he really mean it? Was he actually suggesting she step into a role that seemed worlds away from her current reality? Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grab the opportunity with both hands and never look back. But another part, the cautious, practical side, was screaming at her to slow down, to think it through. What if I mess it up? She whispered, voicing the fear that had haunted her for years. What if I let everyone down? You won't, he said firmly, because you'll have support. My team will guide you, train you, help you every step of the way. All I need from you is effort, determination, and the willingness to learn. Maria swallowed hard, her mind spinning. This was madness, wasn't it? A single mother with 2 jobs and barely enough to get by being offered a leadership position in a major company. It sounded like something out of a movie, too good to be true. Yet, sitting across from her was a man who seemed utterly sincere, completely convinced that she was the right choice. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice trembling. This is a lot to process. I know, he said gently. And I'm not asking you to decide right now. Take some time, talk to your kids, think it over. But promise me one thing. Don't dismiss this opportunity because you're scared. Trust yourself, Maria. Trust that you're capable of more than you give yourself credit for. She nodded slowly, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. Whether or not she accepted the offer, she knew this moment would stay with her forever. For the first time in years, someone believed in her, not just superficially, but deeply, genuinely. And that alone was worth holding on to. Later that night, as Maria sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, she replayed the conversation over and over in her mind. Was it possible? Could she really step into a role like that, leave behind the life she'd known for something entirely new? Her heart raced at the thought, equal parts terrified and exhilarated. Her kids were asleep in the next room, their soft breathing a reminder of why she worked so hard every day. They deserved stability, happiness, a future full of possibilities. If taking this job meant giving them a better life, wasn't it worth the risk? As she sipped her tea, Maria realized something important. The fear she'd carried for so long wasn't going anywhere. It would always be there, whispering doubts and warning her to play it safe, but maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to control her anymore. Maybe it was time to listen to the quieter voice inside her, the one that whispered, "You can do this." For the first time in years, Maria smiled, not because she had all the answers, but because she was finally ready to find them. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. Her life was about to change, and she couldn't wait to see where it led. The next morning, Maria woke up earlier than usual. Sleep hadn't come easily the night before. Her mind had been racing with thoughts of the man's offer, her kids' futures, and the endless what-ifs that came with such a life-changing decision. As she stood by the window, sipping her coffee and watching the sun rise over the city, she felt a strange mix of excitement and terror bubbling inside her. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for, even if she hadn't realized it until now. A chance to rewrite her story. But as much as she wanted to leap at the opportunity, doubts still lingered. What if she failed? What if she let down not only herself but also the man who believed in her so strongly? These questions gnawed at her, making her hesitate. Still, something deep within her, a quiet voice she hadn't listened to in years, told her to take the risk. After all, wasn't life about stepping into the unknown sometimes? Wasn't that how people grew? Determined to clear her head, Maria decided to talk to her kids. She didn't want to make such a big decision without considering how it might affect them. Over breakfast, she sat down with her son Liam and her daughter Ava, both of whom were still in their pajamas, sleepy-eyed but curious. "Hey guys," Maria began, stirring sugar into her tea. "I need to tell you something important." Liam, who was 10 and already showing signs of being a little skeptic like his mom, raised an eyebrow. "Is everything okay?" he asked cautiously. "It's more than okay," Maria replied, forcing a reassuring smile. "Actually, I've been offered a new job, a really big one. It's different from what I do now, and it could change our lives for the better." Ava, who was 8 and always eager to hear good news, perked up immediately. "Does that mean we'll get to move to a nicer place?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. "Maybe," Maria said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It depends on how things go. But yes, this job could give us more stability, maybe even let me spend more time with you two." Both kids exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of excitement and confusion. "That sounds awesome," Liam exclaimed. "But, are you sure you can do it, Mom? Like, is it hard?" Maria hesitated, touched by her son's concern. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "It's a big responsibility and I'll have to learn a lot along the way, but I think it's worth trying for all of us." Ava reached across the table and grabbed Maria's hand. "We believe in you, Mommy," she said earnestly. "You're the strongest person we know." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, though. She blinked them away quickly. Hearing those words from her children filled her with a surge of determination. If they believed in her, then maybe she could start believing in herself too. Later that day, after dropping the kids off at school, Maria headed to the diner for her shift. Her mind was still swirling with thoughts of the job offer, but she tried to focus on the tasks at hand. Pouring coffee, taking orders, chatting with regulars, it was all familiar, comforting in its routine. Yet as she moved through the motions, she couldn't shake the feeling that this chapter of her life was coming to an end. And strangely, instead of sadness, she felt a sense of gratitude. The diner had been her lifeline during some of her darkest days, and while leaving it behind would be bittersweet, it also represented a fresh start. When the man in the suit walked in later that afternoon, Maria spotted him immediately. Today he looked less formal, wearing a casual jacket and jeans instead of his usual suit. He greeted her with a warm smile, sensing her nervous energy right away. "You look like someone with a lot on their mind," he observed as she approached his table. "Care to share?" Maria took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've been thinking about your offer," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "And I think I want to try. To take the job, I mean." The man's face lit up with a mixture of pride and relief. "That's wonderful news," he said sincerely. "I knew you'd come around." "But," Maria added quickly, holding up a hand, "I need to be honest with you, I'm scared. I don't have experience running a business or leading a team. I don't even know where to begin." He nodded, clearly expecting this response. "That's perfectly normal," he reassured her. "No one starts out knowing everything. What matters is your willingness to learn and adapt. You'll have mentors, resources, and support every step of the way. Plus," he added with a grin, "you've got instincts, something no degree can teach." Maria chuckled softly, feeling a tiny bit of the tension ease. "Instincts, huh? Well, I guess I've relied on those enough in my life." "Exactly," he agreed. "And that's why I trust you'll succeed. You've already proven yourself capable of handling challenges most people wouldn't even attempt." His confidence in her was contagious, and for the first time since he'd made the offer, Maria allowed herself to imagine what this new role might look like. She pictured herself walking into a sleek office building, managing a team of motivated individuals and making decisions that could impact lives. It was daunting, yes, but also exhilarating. "So," she said, leaning forward slightly, "what happens next? How do we start?" "We start slow," he explained. "First, I'll introduce you to the team and walk you through the basics. We'll give you time to adjust, to ask questions, and to find your footing. Think of it as training wheels. You won't be expected to ride solo right away." Maria nodded, appreciating the analogy. "Okay," she said slowly. "That makes sense. But what about money? Financial stuff has always been tricky for me." He waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that. Your salary will cover your expenses comfortably, and there's room for growth as you gain experience. My priority is making sure you feel secure enough to focus on the work." Relief washed over Maria like a wave. For so long, she'd lived paycheck to paycheck, constantly worrying about bills and groceries. The idea of financial stability, not just for herself but for her kids, was almost too good to comprehend. "There's just one thing," the man added, his tone turning serious. "This job won't be easy. There will be tough days, moments, when you'll doubt yourself. But remember why you're doing this. For your family, for your future, and because you deserve more than what life has handed you so far." Maria swallowed hard, nodding firmly. "I understand," she said. "And I'm ready. Whatever comes, I'll face it head on." The man smiled, looking genuinely proud. "That's the spirit. Now let's get started." Over the next few weeks, Maria threw herself into preparing for her new role. She spent hours shadowing employees at the company's Chicago branch, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. At first, the corporate world felt foreign, intimidating even, but she quickly realized that many of the skills she'd honed as a waitress, patience, communication, problem-solving, were transferable. Slowly but surely, she began to gain confidence. Kids noticed the change in her almost immediately. She seemed lighter, happier, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. On weekends, they helped her practice presentations, cheering her on as she rehearsed speeches in front of the mirror. Even Liam, who rarely showed emotion, gave her a thumbs up after one particularly impressive run-through. "You're gonna crush it, Mom," he declared, grinning from ear to ear. Maria hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thanks, kiddo. That means a lot." As her first official day in the leadership role approached, Maria found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. Just months ago, she'd been scraping by, unsure if she'd ever escape the cycle of struggle. Now she was standing on the brink of something incredible, a chance to build a brighter future for herself and her family. Still, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Challenges would arise, mistakes would happen, and there would be days when self-doubt crept back in. But she also knew one thing for certain. She was stronger than she'd ever given herself credit for. And with her kids cheering her on and the man in the suit guiding her every step of the way, she felt ready to take on whatever came next. On the morning of her first day, as she stood in front of the mirror adjusting her blazer, Maria caught her reflection and smiled. Gone was the tired woman who once doubted her worth. In her place was someone braver, bolder, a woman determined to seize the opportunities life threw her way. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her bag and headed out the door. The city buzzed around her, alive with possibility. For the first time in years, Maria didn't feel like just another face in the crowd. She felt like someone destined for greatness, and she couldn't wait to see where this journey would lead.